Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. How are you? I hope you're feeling good, and a big mahalo for tuning in. Today we've got an artist on the line who has been hugely popular here in the islands for a very, very long time. And he got his musical start in the late 60s with a band called Second Helping, before gigs with the new improved Electric Prunes, as well as the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and also Gator Creek. Later he partnered up famously with Jim Messina for a memorable duo project whose harmonies still evoke nostalgia and a feel-good vibe from a time a long time ago. And he's gone on to be a significant solo artist. He's collaborated successfully with folks including sometime Maui resident, our buddy Michael McDonald, also Steve Perry from Journey, Stevie Nicks, to name a couple. More recently, he's kicked into gear with the project Blue Sky Riders, which I'll be looking forward to hearing about. Mr. Footloose himself returns to Hawaii this weekend. He is at the MAC Friday, and then with the Hawaii Symphony Pop Sunday at the Blaisdell Concert Hall. It is a treat to welcome for a conversation the great Kenny Loggins. Aloha and mahalo, Brother Kenny.
Aloha. How you doing?
I am good. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes for me. I really do appreciate it, brother.
My pleasure.
And I guess, I could start in a number of places with you, but I guess I have to start in the beginning because you and I are sort of connected all the way back to the beginning of my life, and I'm sure it's the case for many, many people listening. Mahalo for doing House at Pooh Corner. It's one of my first songs. It's a countless number of other people's. It's steeped in meaning for so many folks, for their parents too. What inspired that amazing, timeless composition, and share some of your special relationship with Winnie the Pooh?
Yeah, well, House at Pooh Corner was the first book I ever read when I was a little kid. And for some reason, it was the finals in high school, and I was, knew I was about to graduate and move on to the next part of my life. And somehow the memory of that book jumped into my head, that last chapter where Christopher Robin is about to leave the 100-acre wood and head on out into the world. And I thought, wow, that's sort of what's happening now. So that became the inspiration for writing House at Pooh Corner. I was 18 or 17 when I wrote it. And then wrote a whole new third verse to it as my fourth child was about to be born 19 years ago.
Right, yeah, the return to Pooh Corner.
Yeah.
And you know what else? I was talking with this cat that I work with, Wayne Yoshioka. He pointed something out to me when I was saying how timeless it was, and he said, it was so out there when you listen to the production and stuff, and I was sitting with my headphones, and it's so rich, it's so lush, it's like you go on a journey with the production, not so much the nitty-gritty Dirt Band version, but then the one that you guys first did in the studio. Can you add any reflection into putting that together and making it into this like sonic masterpiece with little horns and sounds? It holds up so well.
Thank you. That's very much Jimmy's influence on the tune. You can see where the Dirt Band sort of took my original version and made a pseudo-rock version,
right,
based on how I used to play it. And then when I met Jimmy, he influenced my playing, and we started doing a finger-picking version that had the 6/8 break in the middle, and he really orchestrated the song based on the instruments that had sort of fallen into place for Loggins and Messina. The guy that lived downstairs from him was Al Garth. And when I met him, he just happened to be a musician. Well, he happened to play viola, saxophone, a great altos player, and keyboards. So, and he sang. So right there we had like four players in one, and he joined the band, and then he brought in a friend of his who was a classically trained player, John Clark, who played all the saxophones from baritone on through soprano, and he played double reeds, oboe, English horn, and he played all the clarinets, including bass clarinet, and he played these recorders sometimes two at a time. So he was a genius, and he passed away about 5-6 years ago. But what an incredible player he was. So that gave us a wide variety of instrumentation that we could actually reproduce live. That's really what made Loggins and Messina such a unique sound.
Man, What a unique, and that's a good description I can see. Man, and by today's standards, having two cats who can do so many different tasks, that would really work out financially.
It was amazing, yeah, and incredibly lucky. When we did the reunion tour, we were actually considering bringing 4 players to try and replicate what they had done, and it was just financially crazy, and especially in today's marketplace to try and carry such a big band. And then we got lucky because Yamaha makes a synthesizer, like a saxophone synthesizer that can then cover the sound of double reeds and the sound of other instruments, including even strings.
That thing has such a lush sound. Did your kids used to ask you to sing it for them a lot?
Yeah, all my kids were raised on House of Pooh Corner. And a funny story around that. My son, who's now 19, I rewrote House of Pooh Corner into Return to Pooh Corner before he was born, and he's a jock. He's like a full-out baseball player, and he was pitching in a tournament play as a senior this year. And to try and get his goat, the kids on the other team played House of Pooh Corner over the loudspeakers. And he won that game. He almost pitched a shutout. And they asked him, well, did it shake you at all to hear your dad singing before the game? He said, no. He said, I was raised with that song. I went to bed to that song every night. So when they played it, it put me in the zone. I relaxed and pitched my best game ever. I thought we should be playing that song every game.
It'd be like the cat in New York who uses the Metallica tune when he comes out on stage.
Yeah, but can you imagine getting in a fighting mood from House of Pooh Corner?
I can't. And that's a great description, what you said, because it puts me in that same sort of safe, secure, and undoubtedly so many people listening, the way you described your son's reaction, that's the zone it takes you to.
It centered him.
It's a great tool for that, and still to this day, it chokes me up when I hear that song. I can't believe I'm finally talking to the cat who did it. And my mom, by the way, is named Isabel. I know you have a daughter, Isabella. I just had to throw that in there. What I wouldn't give to get you to come into our HPR Atherton Performing Arts Studio and just play that thing acoustic for me, brother. Oh, I'd pay you right out of my pocket. I'm not kidding. I mean, that would just have that thing here. What made you want to be a musician to begin with, Kenny?
Oh, musicians, we can't help it. If you're going there, you don't have a choice. You just, if you're meant to be there, you just have to go there. I just said that to my oldest boy, he's been a musician since he was 13, and he's 30 now. When he was 29, he had to give it up because he couldn't pay his medical, he couldn't pay his rent. It's a very rough life when you're a young musician now because you basically have to travel the country in a van and play for anybody you can and learn to work the social media. It's a full-time gig. You're essentially your own company. And if you don't get lucky, then you starve. And he had a record deal with Jive Records. He made an album. He was doing well, but it just couldn't support himself. And he said, Dad, I can't do it. I want to get married. I want to have a life where I live with my wife at a home. Can you imagine a real home? And I just don't want your life. And I said, well, buddy, that's okay. You don't have to. And I said, if you can give this up, I recommend you do. But if you can't, then you've got to go 110%. And that's pretty much the start for me was, that I took guitar lessons. And from the moment I started learning to play guitar, I started writing. And it really was Bob Dylan that inspired me, and then Lennon and McCartney that continued to inspire me to write. And then I just went from band to band.
We're really lucky that you never gave it up. That's a humbling story. Your son's journey sounds a lot like being in the radio business. You can tell him.
Yeah.
Because it's not a lot different than that. I've read online, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, because who the hell knows if it's true, that record company heavy Clive Davis was instrumental in the Loggins and Messina duo being more than just that one-off project and becoming the duo that it was for so many albums. True?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we named Kenny Loggins with Jimmy Messina sitting in our first album.
Yep.
Because we thought Jimmy would only for one record, and then he would produce the next Kenny Loggins record. That would be my first solo album. That was our plan. And Clive said, basically, no way am I releasing the album of a band that's planning on breaking up. So he said, I'm not going to release Sitting In unless you guys give me a 6-year commitment. And we were getting along great, and we felt there was that musically we were very copacetic, so we thought, sure, why not? 6 years, that's not that big a deal. And so we did it. We did a 6-year commitment. And then I went solo after 6 years with Celebrate Me Home, which was a radical departure from Loggins and Messina.
All right, so there's a lot of background. I like that. That story's true. There's one for the internet. Click that off in the yes column. Another one that kind of close to home for us, not nearly as close to home as the house at Pooh Corner, and I don't know if anything could be, but how'd you hook up with Mike McDonald? He lives over on Maui. I've gotten to do some stuff with him. He's a really solid cat. And you wrote a tune with him that also has that kind of, it has meaning for so long. And you grow up and you go through stuff, and then you listen to What a Fool Believes, and man, it has this resonance. Who wrote what in that? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's a good story, actually. I'd heard, the first time I heard Michael's voice was off of Living on the Fault Line, the Doobie Brothers album.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard it, I said, there is a voice that's as important as Steve Winwood from Traffic. I said, this is going to be one of the important voices of rock and roll, and I want to meet this guy. And the stuff he was writing was unique to the time. And I said, I really got to write with this guy. So I was looking for him, and as the rumor goes, he was looking for me and a few other people to do some collaborations with. And so we talked on the phone through our managers, and I went over to his house. I like to say we were writing together before we met, because as I was unpacking my guitar from my car, he had the front door open, and I heard strains of and he had all he had lyrically was what a fool believes he sees, no wise man has the power to reason away. I thought, my God, that's the best line I've heard in years. It was like, had so much meaning.
Yeah.
You could hinge anything off that line.
No doubt.
So we proceeded to chisel away at it. But when he stopped at the bridge. He didn't have a bridge for it. In my imagination, already being a big Mike McDonald fan, I heard the bridge in my imagination. So he answers the door, and I say, hey, Mike, play that thing you were just playing. I think I know how the bridge goes. So we started even before a glass of water. We were right in on it.
Man, and all these years later, it's one of those tunes. When I was a kid, I was more into like heavy stuff, like a lot of kids. And then you grow up, and things like that. They just, man, the lyrics, they just jump right out at you, man. Heavy.
Yeah, I think all of us get a turn at being that fool.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, the lessons in that, man. It's just...
Yeah, and then This Is It was our second song we wrote together. Having won the Grammy with What a Fool Believes, we were a little intimidated to even try writing a second song. So when we talked about collaborating again, I said, well, why don't we just write a shitty song and let that be okay, so we can get that out of the way, and then we don't have to worry about our next song. So the very next thing we wrote was This Is It.
Which is written for your pop, too, in some ways, right?
Yeah, it was written, well, we had the melody. My dad was going in the hospital and had tried to convince me that he was prepared to die on the operating table. So I went into writing with Mike that day and felt pretty emotional about the whole thing. And when we hit the line, it was, there have been times in my life I've been wondering why it was the opening line we had. And then you think that maybe it's over only if you want it to be was the only other line we had. And we thought that line referred to a love affair, but then when my dad said what he said, I thought, oh no, this is a song about life and death.
Oh, wow.
And it made it a lot more important to write it and keep the focus on, making a decision of whether or not you're going to go on.
I get it. Total redirection of the purpose of the song. And it really does add a different resonance, too, for a pop song like that all these years later, especially when you think about it from that context. That's another one of those things, kind of like the relationship thing. As you get older, sentimental things like that start to hit you harder, too, lyrically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it wouldn't be fair to not give a plug to your latest project before I wrap it up with you, because I'm respectful of your time limits and stuff. Blue Sky Riders. Tell folks what it's all about and maybe some of the inspiration behind that.
Yeah, I was writing an album that I made for Target called How About Now? And in the process, I decided to go to Nashville and write with some great, collaborate with some really great songwriters out of Nashville and try a different approach to what I was doing. And in the process, I wrote with an amazing talent named Gary Burr, who's in the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, having had 13 number one songs that he's penned. And we got along incredibly well, and we wrote together very fluidly, very quickly, and laughed a lot and had a great time. And when we sang together, we sounded like brothers. And I thought, if this was 20 years ago, we'd start a band. And we kicked it, we just laughed about that and kicked it around. And then a little while later, I was working on a children's album for Disney, and I called him. I was running in the foothills of Santa Barbara, and the endorphins kicked in, and I thought, you know what? I really should do that. So I called him up and I said, you still interested in making a band? And he thought about it. He said, yeah, I'm open to that. And so I said, let's plan on it. And I went back into the studio a couple months later, had another flash of insight, and I called him and said, we need a third. We need a girl who's a great singer-songwriter. And I said, I have a sense you know her. And he said, no, I'm dating her. That's Georgia Middleman. She sings on all my demos, and we have an incredible blend. So I went to Nashville and met her, and within an hour, the three of us had written our first song together and decided that was the band. And, it's been really a ball just to reinvent myself and reinvent the music and to get back into that country rock direction that was Loggins and Messina. So, yeah, we started our band and decided to make a go of it, and it's just been a ball since then. We've had a great time. We wrote the whole album together as a trio, which, most trios don't do that. You usually individuals write, and then they bring it to the band. But in this case, we wrote and arranged everything as we went. So we made really precise demos as we went along, and it's really been a lot of fun.
And it's a true collaborative effort in what you're saying, too.
Totally, yeah. And I can't tell you how much fun it's been to get that dream of being the Beatles come through my body again. It's like, here we go, one more time around.
Wow, it makes you feel that good. That's good to hear that it has that kind of energy for you. Kenny, I hope this wasn't a drag doing this with me. I really do hope you at least were somewhat entertained by these questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And if there's any way, while you're in Honolulu, to have you briefly stop by our studio to record a song acoustic, or if not, I'd love to come by your sound check, the hotel, wherever convenient, just to record a brief in-person interview. Do you think that would be possible?
Yeah, that is possible. Whoever hooked up this interview, mention it to them and have them call my road manager, CJ Powell. And you can come by the sound check and we'll put something together.
You're a kind man. I appreciate it.
Okay.
You're the king, Kenny. I'll get in touch with Mandy, I guess it was. I give you a big hug. Thank you so much for doing this with me. And I'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
All righty. Thank you.
Be safe. Aloha, brother.
Bye.